British media report claimed that Japan had been paying a British think tank to wage an image-tarnishing campaign against China. What kind of role is the Henry Jackson Society playing in China-Britain relations? The Japanese embassy in the UK has chosen to stay silent after the report was released. What message does its silence convey? And if the report is true, what is Tokyo's motivation in sabotaging China?
我们敦促日方切实端正对华认识，多做一些有利于中日关系改善的事情。
China has made its position clear on the matter, but is the scandal just an isolated event or merely the tip of an iceberg of a wider anti-China campaign? And what should Beijing do to deal with it?
The Sunday Times recently reported that Japan has been paying £10,000 per month to a British think tank to hype up the China threat among British high-level politicians. Although this behavior is somehow unethical and questionable, China's ability to compete in the international communications is undoubtedly more important than ever. To discuss the many issues related to this, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies.
Serving for the Japanese official anti-China diplomacy globally, the public diplomacy of Japan designed to anti-China is starting.
And Einar Tangen, author and columnist.
It seems that alt facts and alt news are now joined by alt opinions. Unfortunately, no one knows what to believe anymore when in a time when it seems that pay for play is the norm.
And we'll also be joined via satellite by Professor Sato Watanabe at Doshisha University in Tokyo. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Natalie Wong, sitting in for Yang Ray today. Welcome to Dialogue with our two gentlemen here in the studio to talk about the hype-up China threat among UK founding by this Japanese payment to the think tank. So it's such a rare scandal that is reported nowadays, especially when all the think tanks receive all kind of money from various sources that you cannot verify. But are you surprised by this incident?
No, the only thing that's surprising is you pointed out that they were caught. Quite frankly, throughout the world, including in the U.S., we have a tremendous amount of this. You have your conservative think tanks, which are supported by conservative money, and then you have your liberal think tanks, which are supported by the other side. Unfortunately, the role of the think tank is to be somewhat independent. People rely on them to have scholarly looks at exactly what the issue should be. And unfortunately, it seems that this is now a thing of the past. People are going to have to wonder about every piece of news they're getting and every opinion.
But how is it going to affect China-UK relations? Is it a big deal?
For Japanese purpose, it should be a big deal because I pay big money to you, so you should say what I want to hear and what the public in UK should hear, should be heard. So it's not a deal for think tank. It's a deal for political agreement. Say, the Japanese, buy British voice, say forget about the freedom of speech, just speech based on what I want, what I dictated. So basically it's an ugly deal, but the deal is a really big deal because the purpose is quite big, say just demonize China on the purpose of Japanese government. So it's a really unique event in the Western world.
Yeah, and I agree with that in the sense that this is the kind of thing that people hired PR firms in the past to do. This is the kind of American political machine, go out and smear whoever it is that you don't like. And the idea that this has now been extended openly to these kinds of these groups really calls into question how society should be dealing with them. Do they have a legitimate purpose? Obviously, if funding is one of the questions, you're going to have to get more into it, and people are going to have stronger filters when they look at these quote opinions.
Yeah, although it's not a big deal for the China-UK relationship, it's, like you mentioned, Professor Yang Xinyu, a big deal in Japan. But Japanese media has been remaining silent on this issue. Let's talk to Professor Sato Watanabe at Doshisha University in Tokyo now. So, Professor, tell us a little bit more about your response to this. Are you shocked at this event?
In a sense, I was shocked, but in another sense, I didn't, surprised, because the countries who are antagonistic to other nations, they are trying to get more information of the antagonistic country, like China for Japan. But it is very, very surprising that this kind of activities was disclosed by the British media. So this is very surprising. The second one is that Japan and China should go hand in hand for the peace of Asian area. However, Japan is not doing along that line. So this is a surprise for me. Thank you.
Well, but of course, it's not surprisingly if you think about the right-leaning attitude of Shinzo Abe's administration. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Mr. Abe has very ambiguous in diplomatic attitudes. The first, he didn't think that Mr. Trump would go into the office, but he came into the office. So he wants to get more better or higher position against Mr. Trump using, speaking the ills of the China so much, and he does everything, even using the this time's channel by the Embassy of the United Kingdom. But already the Yahoo Information News is talking about this, and the people are very mad, angry on this matter.
All right, thank you very much. That was Sato Watanabe at Doshisha University in Tokyo. Appreciate it. Let's go back to our studio guest here. So Professor Watanabe has said that Japan is somehow antagonistic against China. But what about UK? It cannot feed someone that is unwilling to be fed, right? These informations or the opinions are fed to the UK intelligence service.
Of course, they're going to pick which group they're going to go with. And obviously they're looking for some sort of lean that would be anti-Chinese, because otherwise it would be very strange if somebody who was very pro-Chinese suddenly turned around the next day and started being anti-Chinese. So, but you know, the problem is it's almost unstoppable. If I show up, even if it hadn't been the embassy itself who showed up, maybe they sent somebody, a businessman who has strong contacts with the government, and he shows up and he doesn't even say exactly what he wants. He just says, well, I'm concerned, and here's a list of things I'm really concerned. Can you do a study, and can you get some people to stand behind this and look at these findings? I mean, it is almost impossible to stop. But you know, it's really taking away from this idea that democracy is something that we aspire to, and it's become just a game of dirty tricks and trying to manufacturing opinions or news or facts.
But how is China-UK relationship being affected by this? During David Cameron's era, the relationship has been really warm. China-UK has developed a lot of potentially very important projects. But during Theresa May's administration, things have become more rational than before. So is this going to be a tip of the iceberg of the deteriorating relationship between China and UK, or is the relationship still very stable and unaffected by this?
Well, basically, China-UK relationship is too big to be affected by the individual events, no matter it's a positive or negative. But regarding to this case, the plan of Japan was and is the UK-China relation is based on the public opinion. And if the think tank that was bought by the Japanese money kept sending negative signals and information and the views and the remarks constantly affecting the public opinion, then the base of the UK-China relation will be gradually changed in a negative direction. So it will take a long time. So let's suppose there's no such explosion of this event, and if Japan was successful in bringing about what they want in the plan, then their calculation was the public opinion will be more and more anti-China, and the majority of the public UK anti-China, then no matter it's you say Theresa May administration or whatever who the government who led, need to pay the respect to the public opinion. So that is the Japanese plan. Basically, now we have two diplomacies, official diplomacies. Abe has contacted the so-called global diplomacy of Japan. Then they have launched a public diplomacy globally to serve for their official global diplomacy. So I think this event is not an individual accident. It's one of the incidents in the whole plan. They want to launch a global public diplomacy, so for their official diplomacy anti-China. So I think, returning to your question, this event has little influences on the current UK-China relation. But this event really alarmed China that Japan has launched a very dirty war, public diplomacy war against China.
Japan is really ambitious about international influence, is trying to even warm up its relationship between Japan and the U.S., right? With Donald Trump's administration, Shinzo Abe has been trying to contact him and trying to get close with him many times. So where does Japan's insecurity come from?
Well, I think in part from the Second World War and and prior to that, because a lot of the things that happened between not only Japan and China, but South Korea and other places around East Asia. They've never really come to grips with this. We've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. And I think that there's some concern that there would be retaliation. These desires to rehabilitate Japan and call its wartime action somehow normalized, to defer any kind of guilt to these things. But speaking to your economic point, one thing is very important to Britain, and that is with Brexit. If it is a hard Brexit, they'll be falling back on WTO, which would not be very favorable for Britain. Therefore, Britain is going to be forced to, even with an agreement, to start doing bilateral or multilateral agreements, and especially with China. So once again, you're going to have a situation that you have in many places in Asia, where if the Japanese are successful in turning public opinion against China, the economic interests and the feelings, all right, not strategic interests, just feelings, will be at odds with one another. And you see this happening in the US with Donald Trump, and it certainly could be a pattern that's repeated in England.
But it also depends on how much public opinion is turned globally. Let's bring in our Tokyo guest again, Professor Takesaku Watanabe. So, sir, how do you evaluate the global image of China and Japan? Do you think Japan enjoys a better image globally against China?
In Japan now, the ordinary people don't know much or details the relations between the China and Japan, and also the United States. However, the intellectuals say that we must clear every historical facts, and by doing this, the mutual trust between China and Japan should be increased, would be very, very hard. So this is the true direction of the Japanese people, and some media are talking like that, but Mr. Abe, he doesn't have any ears to listen to this voice. This is the problem. In addition, he is now making the utmost efforts to be more close to Mr. Trump. This is another difficult matter.
Well, although Japan is in Asia, it's traditionally considered a Western country, but how does it enjoy its global reputation and image among the Western countries?
Well, among Western countries, there's absolutely no doubt that Japan has a higher status. There's always reference to it as a true democracy, as a leading economic, but these are kind of past laurels. And when you start looking at its actions and in pursuant of trying to enlarge its sphere of influence or hold on to its sphere of influence, it's becoming a very aggressive nation. I mean, in the sense that it's rearming itself, it's getting rid of its wartime neutrality. These types of things are starting to raise the specter of, once again, is Japan rearming itself? Is it going down the road of using force instead of diplomacy? This kind of dirty war that you're talking about in terms of public diplomacy seems to indicate that it is prepared to go to great lengths, whatever is necessary, to get the job done. And this is really the sad part of it. And hopefully people out there are going to start to realize that they're going to have to evaluate exactly what Japan is doing if it's willing to do this. This is no different than what people in the U.S. are accusing Putin of doing. It's no different from what the U.S. was accused of doing to other countries, including Russia. But this idea of interference in other countries by using dirty public opinion, push is really kind of the American democratization of this whole issue of being how countries should come together. It's going to push us further apart.
Now let's take a short break, and after this we'll discuss more on China's efforts to develop its soft power by developing more think tanks as well as think tanks' neutrality. Stay with us after this break. Welcome back to Dialogue. Here in the studio we have author and columnist Einar Tangen and Mr. Yang Xiyu from the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome you both to Dialogue again. So earlier we were talking about think tanks. Let's talk about think tanks itself. In the UK, it has a lot of think tanks that are really top level among global think tanks. During a survey in 2014, the top 10 global international think tanks, UK is ranking only second after the U.S. to have the number of think tanks that is in that short list. So it is a traditional powerhouse in terms of think tanks itself. But how do you think this event is going to affect its global reputation in terms of think tanks itself?
Well, because of the erupt of the event, it's hard to, it's too early to assess the real effects to the think tank's reputation. However, this event really indicate the importance of the so-called soft power contributed by the think tanks. Just as you mentioned, in general, the level of the ranks of the UK think tanks is very high in the globe wide. That's one of the reasons Japanese government, Japan, made the UK think tank as target to make the deal. But I think no matter how think tank work hard to affect the public opinion, in terms of the individual think tank, the effects or the roles are quite limited. Whenever we talk about the software, we always regard the think tank as a whole to evaluate their influences or factor of contributions to the software. So basically, I don't think it's a smart tactics, no matter it's dirty or clear. Buying individual think tanks to do something, it's very stupid because it's the least efficient work.
Some think tanks are pro-China, other pretty hostile against China in Western countries. So how do you think China should respond to that?
China has to build up its own capabilities in this area, and I don't mean by paying groups out there, but China is late to the PR game internationally. And in order to compete in this kind of world, given what's happening and what's been exposed to it, it's going to have to up its game. And that means getting directly involved. In the U.S., you have to hire top-notch PR companies who are helping you coordinate the issues, helping you plug into what's there, and making sure that you're relevant. Obviously, in Britain and Europe, any other place that they want to be, they have to do that. You have to have good relations with the press. I mean, even, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative, you're dealing in over 60 countries. Popular opinion is going to be molded by those newspapers and pundits, think tanks, whoever thinks that they have an issue on this. If you're not actively involved, you're going to be pushed away. You're going to lose out the game.
But China is also doing its best, trying to develop its soft power by enhancing its think tank power.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Well, I think it will take a long run. Just like the modernization of Chinese economy. Several decades ago, Chinese economy was pretty poor, a very low level. Now, China's economy has grown up at a very high level. But compared with the economic level, Chinese think tank remain at a pretty low level. That's why now China, both from the government and from the private, have input more efforts to, as you mentioned, enhance the think tank. But the base for the world-class think tank lies in the intellectuals. We need to educate, we need to train more world-class experts and scholars. But that's not the task that could be bring about overnight, so it will take a long time. But obviously, China has set up the goal of world-class think tank as the agenda, and the process has been started.
Yeah, but I want to add something there. I agree with everything you're saying, but there's this issue: what is a think tank supposed to do? I mean, a think tank is supposed to do a rigorous examination of the data and then come up with conclusion, trend lines, and advice based on that. They're not opinion polls, right? They're not supposed to be, but they're being used that way. They were used that way in Brexit. They were used that way in a lot of the elections that are going around in the world. And this politicization of them is actually diminishing them. So it's important, no matter who your funder is, you have to be transparent. Who is funding us? Why are we doing this? Where's the research, right? If you can do that, then I think you have a credible source. The issue with think tanks is not what they say, but who relies on them. Because it's the policymakers, all right, the opinion makers out there who are actually going to pass laws, who are going to be quoting this. This is why we're doing this. We've looked at these studies. These are intelligent, well-qualified people who've looked in detail at every aspect, and this is what they're telling us.
But think tank, think about the word think. It's an idea. It develops from your mind. So somehow it's more or less opinionated, right?
But the difference is, if I express my opinion and I'm an intelligent person or things, it's no different than if I'm a stupid person.
But looking at all the data, people can go very different directions based on analysis of the same data.
Yes, you can, but the data speaks for itself. There can be different interpretations of it, but once you have that data, and if you want to go over it, you can at least come to understanding the conclusions that are reached. That is not true with an opinion. Opinion is just something that I say. And like I say, people say everyone has an opinion and other things, but it doesn't necessarily make it true. So the issue is we should draw the line somewhere, that these think tanks should be on the politicization process and allow people to actually come out with conclusions that make sense. I mean, good policy depends on them. And if you're simply saying what the emperor wants to hear, or the president wants to hear, or your prime minister, or what you're paid to say, the process is broken. There's no point to them.
We were earlier talking about China's ambition to build up its own think tank power, but let's step back a little bit. How is Chinese think tank going to help Chinese decision makers or policy makers to form up their idea about how to rule the country?
It's a really key question facing China, modern China. I should say by this way, previously, many years ago, there was almost no role, zero role in the policy making process by think tank, and all fundamental policies were made by the leaders, by the officials, no contributions from the think tank. So that basically was the case before the Cultural Revolution. But with the open door policy of China, and with the prosperous of all areas, think tank is getting golden age. Now, the think tank's role in the policy making is increasing, both domestic policy and the whole public policy, both domestic and international. So basically, we are increasing the role of the think tank, but also we are making effort to lifting the quality of the think tank's works, because the research of think tank is very important, because different conclusions, different analysis based on the same data will lead to different opinions.
Yes.
You know, so basically for China's think tanks, I think Chinese think tank takes basically three tasks. Number one, scientific research for supporting the wide range of researches, and then number two, public education, the whole public on all fundamental questions, just like many Western think tanks did. And thirdly, the research policy analysis and the research serving for the policy making process. So basically, think tanks' role now increasing on all three areas.
Is making bigger contributions to decision-making process. Thank you very much for your analysis. That was author and columnist Einar Tengen here in the studio, and Mr. Yang Xuyuan. Earlier we had Sato Watanabe in Tokyo. That's all for today's dialogue. I'm Natalie Wong, sitting in for Young Ray today. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.